Rob from Buckeyes Battlecry here. The regular season's almost wrapped up, and pretty soon we'll be heading into Conference Championship weekend, where playoff implications will be on the line for a number of teams. Some teams will have to win out in order to get in, and others will be able to take a loss and still be able to get into the college football playoffs. But what I'm here to talk about is who will win the Big Ten championship in the possible tiebreaker scenarios. But let's look at the teams. First team, Oregon. They finish out the season against Wisconsin and Maryland, more than likely going to win out. Yeah, Wisconsin will keep it close at Camp Randall night. The crowd will be in it, but Oregon will run off with it in the second half. And Maryland, they want to be competitive. Second team, Ohio State. They play with Northwestern this weekend at Wrigley Field. Going to be no contest. Ohio State will more than likely get another shutout. And then the following weekend, they have a big showdown with Indiana, undefeated Indiana, at the Shoe. And then the weekend after that, it will be the game, the biggest rivalry in all of college football against the Michigan Wolverines. All right, third team, Indiana, on a bye week. And then they got that big showdown against Ohio State in the Shoe. Then they close out the season with Purdue. That Purdue game, not even going to be close. Purdue sucks. They haven't been the same without Jeff Brom. No more spoiler makers. Then the fourth team, Penn State. They close out the season against Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. They should be able to handle these teams easily, but with James Franklin, you never know. All right, let's go into the tiebreaker rules and then the different scenarios. So tiebreaker rules. We're looking at head-to-head regular season, record against all common conference opponents, record against mutual conference opponents with best record, best Big Ten win percentage of conference opponents, highest ranking by Sports Source Analytics after regular season. I have no idea how that got in there. It shouldn't even be relevant. And then the random draw of tied teams. So let's go into the different scenarios. So for the possible four-way tie, which I think that it's just highly improbable because Oregon has been playing at an elite level and they're more than likely going to win out. But let's just get into this. The possible four-way tie. Oregon would have to lose one of their last three games. All right? Again, highly unlikely. Ohio State beats Indiana and wins out. Penn State wins out, and the result would still end with an Ohio State versus Oregon game. And this is why. The head-to-head play. Oregon, they'd have their big win against Ohio State. Ohio State, they have wins over Indiana, Penn State, but they lose to Oregon. That's the thing. It's a big hit to Indiana and Penn State that they don't play Oregon, or else we have a different conversation about this, head-to-head play. Or maybe it's not such a bad thing that Indiana and Penn State don't play Oregon. Who know? I don't think they'd win those games. But so for Penn State, they'd have a loss to Ohio State. In Indiana, they'd have a loss to Ohio State. So head-to-head play would have Ohio State and Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. And even with the three-way tie, it would still be Ohio State versus Oregon. And it would be because Ohio State has won against Penn State, Indiana, and Penn State has a loss to Ohio State. Indiana has a loss to Ohio State. So, who will win the Big Ten? My prediction And if you go back to any of my videos that I've done, I predicted Ohio State would have to have an early loss in the season in order to go on and win the Big Ten championship and fulfill all their goals. And they did that against Oregon. And if you look at that game, Ohio State hasn't played their best football. A lot of miscues, a lot of penalties, that final minute drive, just complete trash, cost them the game. But I'm glad it cost them the game because they woke up. They're hitting their stride. They really hit their stride against Penn State. They finally fixed the offensive line. And I think that they're going to go on, beat Indiana. It's going to be close, but let's look at what Indiana did against Michigan. If Michigan has a competent play caller on offense and a quarterback, we're looking at an Indiana loss. All right? Michigan's defense, elite. They have 4 first-round picks. One of them was out, but they still had Josiah Stewart, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. And their defense is what kept it close. The talent separation was there. Yeah, Indiana blew out all those teams in the beginning. Their biggest game before that was against Nebraska. We all know how Nebraska's doing. But we saw the talent separation when Indiana went up against a really good defense. Look at the second half stats for Indiana. -2 rushing yards. The only rushing yards they had was to close out the clock. So, I think Ohio State will beat Indiana based on talent. They go on to beat Michigan after that 3-year stretch of losing. And then they get their revenge against Oregon in the Big Ten championship.